Promise of home. My name is Lucy. I am 10 years old. I live in a small apartment with my family. My grandmother is kind and gentle. She takes care of me and my little brother. His name is Tom, and he is 7 years old. Our home is not big, but it is warm and full of love. We do not have much money, but we are happy together and help each other. Every day my grandmother works at home. She makes clothes with soft wool. She uses her hands to knit scarves, hats, and sweaters. She works every day and never stops. She sells the clothes in the market near our street. People like her scarves because they are soft and warm. I love watching her knit at the table. Her hands move like magic in the quiet room. Every night, my grandmother reads us a story. She sits on the old chair in the corner. Tom and I sit beside her with a blanket. Her voice is slow, sweet, and full of love. I close my eyes and listen to every word. The stories make us feel calm and safe. Tom always smiles and holds my hand. These are my favorite moments in the world. One morning, something was wrong in the house. My grandmother could not stand up from her bed. She held her back and said, "It hurts too much." She could not walk or sit without pain. Her face looked tired and sad. Tom was scared and held my arm. I was scared too, but I stayed quiet and strong. I gave her tea in a small cup. I put a blanket on her legs and helped her lie down. She smiled at me, but her smile was weak. I sat beside her and held her hand. I told her to rest and sleep. I looked at the wool basket near the door. There were many scarves inside, ready to sell. I had to do something. Now I went to our kind neighbor, Miss Sarah. She lives next door and always says hello. I told her about my grandmother and her back pain. She listened to me and touched my shoulder. She said, "Let's go to the market together." We packed the scarves in a big brown bag. I put on my warm coat and boots. I felt nervous but ready. The street was cold and full of people. We walked to the market slowly with the big bag. Miss Sarah gave me a small table and a chair. I placed the scarves on the table and stood behind it. I smiled at the people walking by. I said, "Warm scarves handmade with care." My voice shook a little, but I kept smiling. A lady stopped and touched a red scarf. She asked, "How much is this scarf?" I didn't know what to say at first. I looked at Miss Sarah, and she told me the price. I said it to the lady, and she smiled. She gave me the money and took the scarf. I said, "Thank you." I felt proud and full of hope. More people came to the market. Some looked at the scarves and some bought them. I smiled and said hello to everyone. My hands were cold, but my heart was warm. A man bought 2 scarves for his daughters. He said they looked nice and soft. I said thank you and wrapped them for him. I felt happy and proud of my work. I stayed at the market for many hours. I watched people walk, talk, and shop. Some people smiled at me. Some asked questions. A young woman said she loved the blue scarf. She gave me money and said it was for her mother. I liked hearing their kind words. I was tired, but I didn't want to stop. I felt like I was doing something important. At the end of the day, I counted the money. It was more than I thought. Miss Sarah smiled and said, "You did well today." I smiled back and held the money tight. We walked home together slowly and quietly. The sky was dark, and the wind was cold. But I felt strong. I had helped my family. I had made a difference today. When we got home, Tom ran to the door. He hugged me and said, "You're back." I gave him a big hug. He was happy to see me. I took off my coat and boots. Grandmother was still in bed. She opened her eyes and smiled at me. I sat beside her and told her about the market. Her eyes were soft and full of love. I gave her the money. She touched it and looked at me. She said, "Thank you, Leah. You are brave." I felt warm inside. I held her hand and said, "Rest more. I will take care of things." She closed her eyes and rested again. Tom sat beside her and showed her a picture he drew. We all stayed close and quiet that night. I helped Tom with his homework. He had math problems and reading words. He did not want to study. He was tired and wanted to play. I told him, "We can play after." I read the questions to him slowly. He answered some right, some wrong. I smiled and said, "Good job." He tried again and did better. After the homework, we ate soup for dinner. It was warm and simple. I gave grandmother a small bowl. She ate a little and went back to sleep. Tom and I cleaned the table and washed the dishes. I felt tired, but I kept going. I had to be strong now. I had to take care of my family. Before bed, I sat near the window. I looked at the stars in the sky. The night was quiet. I thought about the day. I thought about the market, the money, and my grandmother. I was scared before, but not now. I was learning how to help. I was learning how to be brave. And I was ready for tomorrow. The next morning, I woke up early. The sun was still low in the sky. I looked at my grandmother. She was still sleeping. Her face looked a little better. I got up, made tea, and checked on Tom. He was still asleep, holding his toy bear. I opened the window a little. The air was cold but fresh. I took a deep breath and felt ready for the day. After breakfast, I cleaned the room. I folded the blankets and washed the cups. Then I looked at the wool basket. There were still some scarves left. I counted them one by one. I wanted to go back to the market. I thought of the people who smiled yesterday. I wanted to sell more and help my family again. I packed the scarves in a clean bag. Before leaving, I wrote a small note for grandmother. I told her where I was going. I kissed her forehead and told Tom to be good. He nodded and gave me a big hug. I put on my coat and boots. I took the bag and walked out. The street was quiet. Only a few people were outside. The air was cold and sharp. At the market, I set up the table again. Miss Sarah was there too. She gave me a warm smile. I arranged the scarves in rows. They looked colorful and neat. Soon people started walking by. Some stopped and looked at the scarves. I said, "Warm scarves for cold days." A child touched a green one and smiled at me. A man asked, "Did you make these?" I said, "My grandmother did." He nodded and said, "They are beautiful." He bought one and said he needed a gift. I wrapped it for him and thanked him. Another lady bought 2 scarves for her daughters. She said they were perfect for school. I smiled and said, "Thank you." It felt good to help. Later it started to snow. The ground turned white and soft. My fingers were cold, but I stayed. I sold more scarves and kept smiling. The snow made the scarves look even nicer. People walked slower and stayed longer. Miss Sarah gave me a cup of warm tea. I drank it and felt better. I was tired but proud of myself. When I finished, I packed the empty bag. I had sold almost everything. I said goodbye to Miss Sarah and walked home. My feet were cold, but my heart was warm. I had more money in my pocket. I walked faster, thinking of grandmother and Tom. I wanted to tell them everything. I wanted to see their smiles again. At home, I found Tom reading a book. He looked up and said, "You're back." I nodded and smiled. Grandmother was awake. She looked stronger. I sat beside her and gave her the money. Her eyes were wet. She said, "Thank you, Leah." I held her hand. I said, "We're a team." And I meant every word. The next few days were cold and windy. The sky was gray, and snow covered the street. I stayed home and took care of everything. Grandmother needed rest, and Tom needed help with school. I cooked simple food and kept the rooms clean. Each morning, I made tea and checked on my grandmother. Her back still hurt, but she smiled more. That gave me hope and made me strong. Tom had a hard time with reading. He did not like to sit and study. He liked to draw pictures and build small houses with blocks. But school was important. I sat beside him every day. I read the words slowly and helped him sound them out. Sometimes he got upset and said it was too hard. I told him, "Try again." And he did. He tried and he got better. One afternoon, I found him drawing us at the market. In the picture, I was standing behind the table of scarves. He was next to me holding my hand. Grandmother was smiling from a window. I looked at the picture for a long time. I felt proud and a little sad. I missed her stories. I missed hearing her read to us. But I knew she would get better. That evening, I cooked soup with potatoes and carrots. I found some old bread and made it warm. We ate together and laughed at Tom's stories. After dinner, I helped grandmother sit in her chair. She held a book in her hand. Her voice was still soft, but she read a few lines. Tom clapped and smiled. It felt like a little light came back to our home. The next day, I visited the market again. This time, I brought 2 new scarves. Grandmother had made them slowly with soft purple wool. I put them on the table and hoped people would like them. The market was busy. People walked fast with red noses and big coats. I called out with a smile, "Warm scarves made with love." Some people stopped and looked. A young girl picked up the purple scarf. She smiled and asked, "Did you make this?" I said, "My grandmother did." She said it was beautiful and gave me money. She wore it right away and waved goodbye. A boy came next. He had no hat and his ears were red. I gave him a discount and he bought a scarf. He said, "Thank you." I felt proud again. That day, I sold every scarf. I felt light and happy as I walked home. I thought of grandmother and Tom. I thought of how much we had done in a short time. At home, I put the money in a small box near the table. Grandmother saw it and said, "You are doing well, Lee." I hugged her gently. I said, "Because you taught me how." Later that night, I sat by the window again. I looked at the moon and the quiet street. Snowflakes fell like feathers. I thought about everything that had happened. I was not just a girl anymore. I was learning how to care, how to work, and how to lead. I was still scared sometimes, but I was also brave. I was growing day by day. One morning, I woke up early and made breakfast. The sun was shining, and the snow on the ground sparkled. It was a good sign. Grandmother sat in her chair and drank tea slowly. She looked stronger. Her back still hurt, but she could move a little more. Tom was doing a school project. He needed colored paper and glue. I said we would go get some together after lunch. After we ate, we put on our coats and boots. I held Tom's hand as we walked to the small shop near the park. The snow crunched under our feet. The sky was clear and blue. In the shop, Tom picked red, blue, and green paper. He found some glitter too. He was very excited. I paid for the things, and we walked back slowly, talking about his project. At home, he worked at the table. He cut shapes and glued them on the paper. He made a picture of our family, grandmother, me, and him, standing under a big sun. I smiled as I watched him. He said, "You are the sun, Leah." I didn't say anything for a moment. Then I hugged him and said, "And you are my light." He smiled and kept working. That evening, we sat together on the floor. Grandmother told us a short story. Her voice was still soft, but we listened carefully. It was a story about a little fox who helped his family during a cold winter. Tom loved the part where the fox found food under the snow. He said, "Like you, Leah." I laughed and said, "Maybe I'm part fox." The next day, I went to see Miss Sarah. She had more wool for us. She also gave me some warm socks she had knitted. She said, "For you, for all your hard work." I thanked her and felt my eyes fill with tears. She was kind and always ready to help. We talked for a while. Then I walked home with the wool and the socks in my bag. When I got home, I gave the socks to grandmother. She touched them and smiled. "So warm," she said. I gave her the new wool too. She looked at the colors and said, "These will make beautiful scarves." I helped her sit by the table and put the basket next to her. Her hands moved slowly, but she began to knit again. That moment felt special. Each day after that, we found a new rhythm. I went to the market, helped Tom, and cleaned the home. Grandmother knitted when she could. We laughed more. We ate simple meals together. The house felt full again, not full of things but full of care. We helped each other. We didn't have much, but we had love, and it was enough. One night, I sat alone in the kitchen. I looked at the small box with money. It was not full, but it was growing. I thought about how far we had come. I remembered the first cold morning, the fear and the worry. Now things were different. We were stronger. I was stronger. I felt ready for anything that might come next. 1 week passed, and grandmother stood on her own. Her steps were small, but she smiled with joy. Tom jumped up and down, clapping his hands. I helped her sit near the window with her warm scarf. She said, "I'm getting stronger." The room felt warmer, and the light looked brighter. We were all happy, and it felt like spring had finally come again. That morning, she picked up her needles once more. She held the soft blue wool and began to knit slowly. Her hands moved gently, but they didn't shake anymore. I sat beside her and watched with joy and pride. "You did so much," she said to me softly, looking at me with love. I smiled wide. She was proud of me, and I was so proud of her too. Later, I cleaned the kitchen and found an old notebook. It was full of grandmother's scarf designs. She had drawn flowers, stars, leaves, and hearts. I showed it to her, and she smiled with warmth. "These were my best ideas," she said softly. Then she gave the notebook to me. I held it close, feeling like I had found a treasure. Tom worked on a new drawing that afternoon. He made a picture of our little family. Grandmother was in her chair, knitting a red scarf. I stood beside her, holding a basket of wool. Tom was laughing under a big sun. I hung the picture near the kitchen door. It made me smile every time I saw it. It reminded me of how far we had come together. We all went out together on Friday morning. The snow was gone, and the park was green again. Grandmother walked slowly, holding my arm carefully. Tom ran ahead, chasing birds and laughing. We sat on a wooden bench in the sun. The air was fresh and soft. It was a perfect day full of light and hope. We felt like we had everything we needed. Back at home, we made hot tea and toasted bread. Grandmother told a new story she had remembered. It was about a girl who helped her family with love and wool. I listened and laughed. The story sounded just like us. Tom looked at me and whispered, "That's you, Leah." I said nothing, but my heart was full of love and joy. That night, I sat by the window alone. The room was quiet, and the stars were bright. I opened a small notebook and began to write. I wrote about the market, the scarves, the snow, and our smiles. I wanted to remember everything we had faced. I wanted our story to stay alive forever in my heart. The next morning, I went to the market again. This time, I brought some of my own designs. People smiled and asked who made them. I said, "My grandmother taught me how to make these." Some people bought scarves and some gave kind words. I felt proud, not just for me but for us. We had done this together. Back home, Tom was doing his homework at the table. Grandmother was knitting near the window. I sat down and looked around. The small apartment was full of love and warmth. Not perfect, not rich, but warm and full of care. I knew everything would be okay as long as we had each other. I closed my eyes for a moment and took a deep breath. I thought of everything we had been through. I thought of tomorrow, the days to come, and how we would face them together. I was not afraid anymore. I had learned how to care, how to work, and how to grow. I was ready for what was next, with love, hope, and the strength we had gained as a family. It's a good way to practice English every day. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories.